Hi everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the All Things Sport podcast. My name is Scott, I'm a host and I'm a member of the South Lanarkshire Young People Sport Panel, which is a group of young people within South Lanarkshire trying to raise a profile of sport within our locality and be the voice for young people in sport. In this podcast, we'll talk about a variety of topics ranging from girls and women's in sport, inclusion, volunteering, and many more. We hope that through this podcast, we can provide our listeners with some value that will help young people along their sporting journeys and inspire as many of them as possible to be involved in sport. In this episode, we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Tony McDaid, who is the Chief Executive of the Caledonia Gladiators and someone who has had a wealth of experience in working in education, which leads into our theme perfectly for this episode, as we'll be talking about all things exams and the benefits of physical activity while doing exams. Well, firstly, Tony, thank you very, very much for giving up your time to join us today. We really do appreciate it. And we really do appreciate someone like yourself coming on with the amount of experience that you've had in all the kind of different jobs, which I'm sure we'll talk about throughout the podcast. So yeah, we really do appreciate you coming on. So I think we'll just get straight into it and jump into it. So for our listeners that maybe sort of don't know who you are or maybe haven't heard of you before, could you give us a little bit about your background and kind of how you've got to where you are now, the different jobs you've had in between, maybe a little bit about your sort of upbringing, and a little bit about that to provide our listeners with a bit of sort of value on if they don't know you, haven't heard of you before.
No problem. Scott, good morning. I'm delighted to be here as well. I'll try not to bore you with the start about what I've done in terms of my career as well. Maybe the first thing is I loved sport at school. That was the main thing for me, was that it was something that was really important to me, whether that be in my PE class or whether that being involved in different activities. I have a primary 5 report. I went back to the school in which I was a pupil to teach, and in my primary 5 report, I managed to get hold of that. And in my primary 5 report, it says in it, wants to be a PE teacher, and the word definitely is underlined. So I don't know what that was. I don't know why. I don't even know if I knew what a PE teacher really was at that point in time in primary school. Maybe I saw somebody in a cool tracksuit or something like that. So the reality for me is that started at school level. I was keen and involved in sports activities at lunchtime, swimming, rowing for a significant period of time, played football a lot, and then got into basketball. And through the sport I was involved in at school, I was fortunate to then play at a reasonably decent level from basketball. I'm a PE teacher to trade, is really what I am. That's where I started. That's where my heart lies. That's really what I wanted to do, work with children and young people. But it was that sporting start for me. So I then started to train to be a PE teacher. I come from the Gorbals in Glasgow, just in the centre of Glasgow. I went to a school called John Bosco Secondary School, which is now not there. It's now one of these roads that go through it. So I moved to Jordan Hill to study PE just at the end of my 6th year. And I was playing basketball pretty seriously at that point as well. I was lucky. I was a senior internationalist just at around about 18. And then, so I was playing full-time basketball and I was trying to manage my studies during the day as well. Universities are very good at that, managing high performance. At that point in time, when I was playing, our team practiced at night time. I was full-time at night time. We played in the British League and I was playing every second weekend away. But I was managing a full-time education course as well. But I loved the notion of being a PE teacher. So I was a PE teacher. And then spent a long time teaching. I was in Glasgow for a period of time, but really my teaching career moved to South Lanarkshire, where I became the head of a PE department at Cathkin High School in Cambuslang. I was there for a good number of years as both head of PE and a deputy head teacher within the school, so for a 10-year period. And it was really something that was significantly important to me, and seeing young people be physically active. Running a PE department was something that I thoroughly enjoyed as well. I then moved to East Kilbride to Caledonia High School. I did the merger of Hunter High and Claremont High to become Caledonia High's head teacher. So I was the head teacher of Hunter High for about 18 months while the merger was happening. And I then worked with the staff. We put the merger together. And then in August 2007, Calder Glen came into existence because it wasn't there prior to that. So we did the merger, and I stayed there for a considerable period of time. And in about 2013, I moved centrally into South Lanarkshire Council to be effectively head of secondary schools. So I moved away from the school environment at that point in time as well. And again, stayed within South Lanarkshire and moved to be Executive Director of Education was my last job in the council. That was, I started that, I was appointed in 2016 to be Executive Director of Education, and then stayed on till towards the end of 2013, midway through 2013 as Executive Director. Now, the Director's job in South Lanarkshire, there are obviously over 150 schools, early years, youth learning environment, psychological services. So I was lucky. It was looking after the whole education service. There was about 8,500 staff in South Lanarkshire in education, and looking after all the establishments as well. So that was really good. Again, I enjoyed that job immensely. But I had an opportunity to move to Caledonia Gladiators, which is Scotland's professional basketball franchise. And why wouldn't you do that? For me, this was about, I've said to a lot of people who asked me, I wanted to go back to the place I started. I'd been a long time in education, been over 30 years, well over 30 years in education. I've always known that I was, at some stage, was going to head back into sport and the place that I started, and that's what I've been doing for the past couple of years. We're here based in PlaySport in East Kilbride. This is where I am today. We have an arena, we have a 1,600 seater arena, and we're big and busy. We have a men's professional team, a women's professional team, and lots of community activity. So that's a wee bit about the potted history of me and my experience and background.
Brilliant. So it sounds like obviously you've been involved. Well, sports kind of always seemed to have kind of driven you on sort of throughout your career and has led you into kind of all these different jobs that you've had. So you said that you're kind of at heart you always wanted to be a PE teacher, and that was kind of what the kind of first love was. Was that something that was driven by your upbringing of playing sports and playing basketball and playing sort of all these different sports? And like you say, was that something that you always sort of knew you wanted to do?
Yeah, no question, Scott. And I don't know why, because it is that thing. I think it was just a thing I love doing. And working with children and young people as well, because they are two different things. Working in sport and working with children and young people are not the same thing. I quite like them both. So for me, that was a good thing. It seemed a sensible thing to do. And I've often said this, what I didn't know, and I wouldn't have said as an 11-year-old I've ended up playing basketball, fairly seriously. I actually, as I say, football was probably the main thing I was interested in at that point in time. But literally somebody put a ball in my hand, my PE teacher put a ball in my hand as an 11-year-old, and it completely changed the trajectory of what I did, because I was then really interested in it. I loved the sport. It was something I had fun in and enjoyed. And from there, although I wouldn't have been able to understand that as an 11-year-old, the importance of that was the reality for me, though, that it did change how I moved and what I did. And ultimately for me, that was the main thing. And then all of those other sporting opportunities, it seemed then a natural move to me that I wanted to then apply to teach. I also, it's that thing about having a backup plan. Accountancy was the other part of the backup plan. I think I'd rather ended up as a PE teacher than the accountant. So this is, and I ended up teaching, and it was the right choice for me.
How important was that, do you think, having a kind of sporting upbringing to kind of lead you on to the kind of career that you've had? Because it's like you seem to find anyway that a lot of people kind of go through their upbringing, and they have, whether it's a sporty upbringing or sort of anything else like that. But then a lot of people sort of seem to kind of like they change their careers and they end up doing something completely different. So how important was that, do you think, kind of having that sporting upbringing to kind of drive you into a job where you can ultimately like become that person that got you into sport in the first place?
I think that's really important, actually. I mean, ultimately, your career pathway will change and can change. Lots of people do lots of different things, and you don't need to know what you want to do at 8 years of age. Indeed, some people maybe at 38 years of age don't quite know what they want to do. I would just say find the thing you love. Find the thing that you have a passion. That was, for me, it was about sport and physical activity. That was straightforward in my mind, that was the one thing that I was going to do. No matter what it was, that was my main interest. And in the end, I really didn't do anything in my job that on a day-to-day basis when I was Director of Education wasn't sport-based, but lots of the lessons I learned was sport-based. Lots of that notion of having to work hard, having to be well planned, having to dig in when moments don't go well for you. And that's the reality of playing sport at a serious level, and indeed the reality of your job, that not all things will go well for you, and you have to try to see through those moments. And so there's lots of learning, I think, from being involved in sport that you can apply to any job. But the predominant thing I would say in this instance is, sport is great for me, but I would have said as a head teacher or director of education, for people more generally, find the thing you love. Go find the thing you love and chase that, because in the end, that's the thing that will define you. And also those are the lessons that you will learn. And it might be that you might not do that in your job, but maybe some of the lessons that you've learned in the thing you love, musical instrument, drama, art, sport, those are the lessons that you learn, and those can be directly applied into your job. And I think sport's the perfect vehicle, in fact, in physical activity for being able to do that.
So moving on then to your kind of role as kind of becoming a PE teacher, and then you say kind of moving on to becoming even the head of PE, which is like an unbelievable role to get to. So just tell us a little bit about that. What did you love? What were some of the highlights of kind of your time of being a PE teacher and working in sport and kind of working with young people, and what did you love about it?
Do you know, it was the most satisfying part of the job, and I've enjoyed all the jobs I've done. But being able there's some defining moments, Scott, and they're not even really big things. I think when we were in Cathkin, it was the old building of Cathkin High, pre the new build situation as well, but it had a swimming pool. And as a PE teacher, the moment a young person's feet can come off the ground when you're teaching them to swim, and especially when they're first year, because if they're in first year and have not learned to swim, they've probably got a fear or an anxiety or a lack of confidence. So being able to teach a young person to swim and get their feet off the bottom of the pool, it's a pretty profound moment. You're not thinking that at the time, but it's an incredible moment, because that thing will always be there for them forevermore. The reality of that is that, so there was small moments in which a young person would just get the thing that you were doing, and you could see the level of satisfaction for them or the level of excitement. The thing I loved about being a PE teacher, it was the subject in which, and I would often say this, young people would be coming at the start before the bell would go and say, at that point, Mr. McDaid, can we go and set the equipment up? And then at the end, when you were saying you were wrapping up, they would say, can we not just stay a wee bit longer? Now, isn't that perfect for a subject? Isn't that a scenario in which you find that young people are really engaged in what you do? The other thing for me, and I often said this to young people who maybe not had a natural affinity to sport and physical activity, PE could find you something. You couldn't tell me that we couldn't find you something, whether that be an individual sport, whether that be a team sport, whether that be something around your own physical activity and well-being, going in to do fitness. We could find you something. I refuse to believe that we couldn't find something for a young person. And actually for that young person, sometimes the trick was to say, just give it a go. The fact that you've never tried it before doesn't mean that you don't like it. It just means that you've not tried it. And trying to find that. So that was the big thing for me as a teacher. The chance where you could see, and it wasn't always with somebody, I know at school that I was thoroughly involved and enjoyed PE, and that was great to have those young people. In actual fact, some of the satisfaction came working with children and young people who may not have naturally thought that physical activity or sport was for them, and then them suddenly finding it. That for me these are some of the joyous moments you had as a teacher.
You speak there, and it seems to be there seems to be more and more now about kind of like everyone's kind of trying different sports now, and there's a lot more kind of more sports out there anyway, even from the time when I was kind of growing up and going through school. There's kind of like, even like we tried lacrosse the other day when I was away in a residential. It was like, I've never even heard of lacrosse and even played it or kind of know anything about it. And there seems to be sort of more impetus on that about trying sort of a range of different sports, and we'll talk a little bit more kind of later on about kind of what does physical activity mean. But was that, like you say, was that the kind of the biggest part of your like kind of philosophy maybe as a teacher, is we'll find something for you? It doesn't matter where you come from doesn't matter kind of what physical attributes you have. It's just we will find a sport and a physical activity for you to do.
Yeah, no question. And when you think about it, there mustn't there? When you think of all the range of sports and physical activity, and I think that the best PE departments, they've been doing that for a long time, and the best teachers, they manage to work with young people. They manage to be able to, young people then trust them, especially when they're trying something that they're not familiar with, because you're then out your comfort zone, aren't you? You need to create the conditions in which young people feel comfortable being out their comfort zone, and then finding that level of satisfaction, and for them to start to make decisions about themselves and to be able to take things forward. And that's about pushing them a bit as well, and it's about making sure that there's options and choice. And I think you're right. I think the notion that you should need to give everything a go, really, don't you, in order to understand what you like and what you don't like. I remember it as an example of that, and that happens as a teacher as well, because you can't be an expert in everything. But I ended up early days as a head of the PE department in Cathkin High, teaching the third year dance class for a whole year, and talk about being out of my comfort zone. The reality of that came though that and it was predominantly girls in the group as well. The department was really forward thinking when I inherited it from the former principal teacher, and I had young people in the PE department through dance that may have not traditionally come to the PE department. And as part of that, the teacher that was teaching dance left, and the subject would have fallen at that stage, and I was determined that the subject wouldn't come out the curriculum, and ended up every morning that I was taking, I had them 3 times a week. It was contemporary jazz and Scottish, and honestly the thought of me feeling sick having to teach dance, because that's not my natural subject, as the class probably would tell you in the end. But the way in which we go over that is that the young people in the class, their skill level, I could tell you about rhythm, coordination, balance, strength, timing, and how all that worked together. The young people in the class, who were all in dance classes pretty much in the community's level of skill, was the bit in terms of demonstration or choreography, they were then able to take that forward. So in actual fact, we managed to find a way in which you would then navigate that. But that for me is an example of there's something for everyone.
That's brilliant to kind of hear that experiences, and I'll definitely need to take some tips off you on how to teach dance, because I'm absolutely hopeless. I can't dance. I've never taught dance in my life, so I'll need to take some tips off you from that.
I'll maybe not give you any tips, to be honest.
So kind of then moving on to kind of through your journey then a little bit, you obviously then become a deputy teacher, and then you eventually kind of through that you work kind of and get into a kind of director's role within the council. How did that kind of come about, and what spurred you on to kind of get into that role and kind of becomes, because that's a very high up role, and sort of something that not many people get the opportunity to do.
I suppose it's that natural evolution. I was happy. I was never looking for the next job. I think it was the notion that going in, my advice would be go in and try and do the job you're doing as best you can. Quite often then opportunity comes your way. Or when I was doing the deputy head's job in Cathkin, and Cathkin was close to my heart, I then go into East Kilbride and thinking I couldn't really replace working in Cathkin, and then you suddenly find yourself in an environment in which, for whatever reason, that it was a place that I felt that was a fit for me. In terms of the school, there was 1,850 young people in the school to start with. It was big. The merger was complicated. So you try and do the best you can in the job that you're in. That was what I would say. Give your heart and soul to something. If you give your heart and soul to something, in the end, it may or may not work. You'll not be defined by that. The reality is, but then sometimes if it goes your way, opportunities then come. Somebody may then come and say, or have a discussion with you about, have you thought about, and that's about being able to, you have an influence in a PE department that influences children and young people specifically around PE and sport. As a deputy, then you get a bit of a wider look about the running across the school, and so you have a wider influence to young people across the curriculum. And as head teacher, you then probably get an influence across your community and your local community itself. And then as director, you get an influence across the authority, and you try to look across, and it's a public service, isn't it, as a local authority. And so therefore you try to make a contribution right across the local authority. So for me, strangely enough, they were quite natural steps, in the sense that you go in and you do the job that you do, and then that you try to have a wider influence at the next stage of that as well. But do you know the other thing as well, Scott, the people I worked with tremendously successful teachers. It wasn't, and support staff and active school staff, it wasn't about moving up a ladder of promotion necessarily. And I say that having been the Director of Education. Some of the best people I worked with weren't involved in a promotion structure, where teachers who stayed in the classroom or PE environment and gave their all every day, and they were learners. They were really good learners, because the job they started out in 25, 30 years ago isn't the same job, because you learn all of the time. And therefore, for me, you shouldn't be defined by being the Director of Education. That just gives you a different set of experiences as being the class teacher, because ultimately the class teacher and the direct contact you have with children and young people, you could argue, can sometimes be a more effective role than me 4 steps away as Director of Education.
Brilliant. What would you say was the best bit about the job, and kind of if there was any kind of highlights which really kind of stand out for you about being the Director of Education?
Sure. I enjoyed the job as Director of Education. It was a thoroughly enjoyable job, and I get a sense of, the biggest thing was going into lots of different schools. That was the best part, was dead easy to say, was going in and seeing lots of those children and young people in different communities across South Lanarkshire, and seeing the levels of opportunities that schools provide. Schools are, at their best, are able to cater for a range of young people in a remarkable way. The young person that I think of school shows, the number of school shows or prize givings, I probably have been to thousands in my career. And the thing is, Scott, I never got bored of them once. I didn't feel that it was a chore. At every single level, going into a prize giving, an awards ceremony, a school show, a sports event, was seeing schools at their best. You were seeing schools in an environment in which they were providing the opportunity to see young people thrive and flourish. And for me, that was the best part of the job. The thing I missed most when I was in the job as director was working directly with children and young people and in a school environment. So the closest I then could get to that was then going back in and seeing it. And okay, I was a visitor, and they probably recognised the fact that they got me in the door and were probably happy to get me out the door. But the reality of that is, when I was there, I enjoyed seeing those schools, seeing what they were doing for their local community, and the connection. Schools can have a special connection to their children and young people, the families, the local elected members. It can be when done well, it can be a special place. And I think that we should, and that's not saying everything is perfect all of the time. The reality is that there are challenges that come along in schools' environment, but the vast majority of time, schools do an amazing job for their children and young people, and children and young people do well in a school environment.
That's absolutely brilliant to kind of hear that, side of your journey, and like you say, from somebody who's kind of been in so many different roles and has kind of been in so many different influential roles as well, where you can make differences to young people. It's really good. So hopefully our listeners can kind of take away some value from that. So moving into kind of what I want to talk about is a little bit around kind of exam season. Obviously, with it being relevant just now, there's a lot of young people who are studying for their exams, whether that's their Nat 5s, their Highers, Advanced Highers. They've obviously kind of gone through that phase of their life just now, and there's a lot of young people that kind of listen to this podcast. So, and there kind of seems to be this maybe a wee bit of a kind of stigma there around, okay, it's exam season, all we have to do now is just focus on exams, and everything else takes a back seat. Which is something that we're kind of, from a kind of sport and physical activity point of view, we're kind of maybe trying to, to challenge more young people on that, and to kind of break that kind of barrier for young people during kind of exam season. So from your perspective, coming from an incredibly sporting background and kind of having a kind of sporting mindset and outlook on things, how important is taking part in sport and physical activity during exam season, and kind of how does that look for young people who maybe kind of aren't maybe sure how to kind of balance studying and balancing doing sport and doing other hobbies and having downtime, and kind of, what do you think about that?
Interestingly, I think it's really important that you continue to do and take part in physical activity during exam time. I think that it benefits you. We're well known the benefits of physical activity. I mean, I'll come on to that in a wee second about what I think they are. But I suppose for me, it can then vary. So if you're a young person that plays, I don't know, they're involved in some degree of team sport, and it's continuous, it's a couple of nights a week and it's a day at the weekend, I would say surely you can find time in your planning for your study that you would allow that to happen. It might be slightly different, and there might be a slight adjustment during that period of time. So for example, if you're involved in really high performance and you're meant to have 12 sessions in the course of a week in terms of physical activity, you probably do need to realistically think of scaling back. What I would be clearly saying though is that's definitely not about stopping. Quite the reverse. I would be saying that you would need the benefit of taking part, actually just the fun bit. If you think about what that happens, that could be going out, and I would say it's about physical activity, not just about sport. I would say it's about, for young people, it might be going to the gym for a session to the gym. It might be, maybe going to a spin class or something along those lines. It might be walking with your friends, because the benefit of getting outside and walking with your pals and is something in of itself that's been physically active. And then, or it might be going and playing five-a-sides. That might be the kinds of things that you want to do. Or if you're involved in sport a bit more seriously, it just might be about keeping that going during that period of time as well and adjusting slightly. Of course, the benefit, it completely takes your mind off the study. You need a space and time to be away from it. The reality of that is you need your head to think about something else, some point in time, not the 24-hour spin cycle of only thinking about the exams, because exams are important. Let's not pretend. I'll talk about how important they are, but they are to your studies and your qualifications. You spend time doing it, so therefore they're important. But it does allow you to relax. Physical activity, it does take away some of your anxieties as well. And the other part's great socially, that you're not sitting in a room by yourself, which in terms of studying, sometimes you will need to do that. You will need a quiet space. You will need the opportunity to have a focus. So therefore, physical activity can flip that for you. And it means that during that period of study, also reminding ourselves that that period of study does end. There is a starting point and there is a finish point. And as we head now towards exam season, that starts to creep up, doesn't it? That level of intensity creeps up. It only lasts for a relatively short period of time. And therefore, managing that through physical activity and sport can be a really good way of helping.
It's interesting because kind of going from kind of my experiences of doing my exams a couple of years ago, it was like, I mean, I've always kind of played football and been involved in kind of sport and physical activity kind of all through my life, really, and I've never really had any breaks from it. And I actually found, like you said there, about the kind of like the social side of sport as well. That's what I found was the biggest, that's what I love most about kind of sport when I was getting to kind of my late teenage years and kind of studying for my exams, was having a team or kind of a group of people around you that were like-minded, a group of people that you got on really well with, and a group of people that you could go out for, like you say, on a Tuesday and Thursday night, and then at the weekend on a Saturday or a Sunday, and go and just have a kick about and just play sport and sort of just stay active. I think, like you say, it's really important, the kind of the social side of it, and kind of how high up would you put the kind of social side of sport during the exam season in terms of the sort of ladder of importance, if that makes sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. For me, it sits really high up. I think almost as important as the physical benefits. You can obviously get physical benefits. The physical benefits are really important. We shouldn't underestimate that. Feeling of being tired and enjoying what I've just done is a good feeling. We feel relaxed. We can feel relaxed after exercise. The social interaction part, though, probably is as significant, because you literally are not then thinking about I'm from a period of time I'm away to look at my studies. That will come back. But it's okay that you've then got a couple of hours with your pals, you're having some fun, you're having a laugh with your pals, you're interacting. Those things become really important. And in fact, that benefit in itself can really help you and probably energises you when you then go back into study. It can find you a nice balance, I think.
So going on to kind of, because I think for a lot of young people, sometimes the biggest challenge or the biggest barrier maybe to that is maybe they don't feel as if there's kind of enough time in the day, to get enough physical activity or to get a sporting session in or go to the gym or something like that. Because I know it can be quite difficult for young people, especially kind of maybe towards maybe towards your fourth year and fifth year, where you've maybe got more subjects to study for, and it can feel like, oh my goodness, I've got 5 or 6 subjects to study for, and I've only got a certain amount of hours in the day to do that. And that can be quite challenging for young people. It's like, well, where do I fit this in? Where do I fit in going to the gym or going to play a bit of five-a-side or going for a walk with my friends or walking with the dog or something like that? So is there any kind of advice you would give for young people as to kind of how to maybe structure their day, or how to maybe look at a day and find some time to kind of get a bit of physical activity in?
Maybe the starting point of that for some young people is, if you already do it and it's already planned, then it's about trying to continue some of that. It's not about the automatic need to stop. Rather, because sometimes what happens is, you can understand completely a young person saying, I now need to spend 10 hours a day on my study. Sometimes that can be counterproductive. So if you already take part in some physical activity at night time or during the day, then continue with it. The second part is, if you don't, then, and you're looking to do something, select a time in the day that suits you. Start by doing that. Start by saying, ironically, start by not saying I need to find 8 hours. Start by saying where am I going to put something in, and then you can build around that as well. So if it's 3 days in the week in which you're saying, well, I'm going to meet my friends at 6 o'clock or something like that. I know I've had the bulk of the day in study, and I'll catch up with my pals and we'll go for a walk. Or I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to go, I know that it's a bit quieter at 3 o'clock. Well, I can do that because if I'm on exam leave, for example, that might allow me the opportunity to do that. Or just now, it being spring break, that's a chance in which you have to do it. If you're back at school for a couple of weeks and you're still in school timetable, again, you might be able to, whether it be school time or just after school, I would say find the time that suits you and plan it in is the big thing for me. And then set that time aside. If you work it into your day, and that's not me saying, recognising that's all dead really straightforward, there may be some compromises in there, and not to worry if you've then missed one of them, because you can then pick it up. The thing I would say is to continue to do that during the period of time of your exam and your study. During your exam leave and during your study, it's really important that you continue to do it. And if you've had to adjust it slightly, just make sure it's planned in.
How important is that as well, from kind of not just a kind of sport and physical activity point of view, but maybe from kind of a leadership point of view as well? I know from kind of our perspective in kind of active schools and leisure and culture, obviously we've got loads of kind of leadership opportunities which are run by the active schools coordinators and then managers and stuff like that, whether that be the sports coach academy programs, the volunteering programs, or like the young people sport panel program, which I'm on just now. Is that also important from that perspective to not maybe neglect those, or maybe kind of get involved as much? Obviously, it's going to be difficult because there takes a bit more time, and there has to be, like you say, a bit more impetus on your kind of exams, because they are important, obviously, from your educational point of view, and to kind of keep moving along the ladder and to reach the kind of any goals that you have and want to achieve. But is that important as well, maybe to kind of to stick at other commitments like that as well?
I think that you need to do that in some ways as well. It might be that you modify it slightly, but most young people are involved in those things because they get something out of them as well. Obviously, there's a level of commitment because you're putting something in, and the groups that you're working with benefit from you being there. But the other side of that coin is you benefit from being part of that group. You benefit from being part of the young leaders sports panel. You benefit from leadership activities. You benefit from coaching. So in a sense, that continuing with some of those commitments really can help you. That can help with the managing of your anxiety, managing that notion of exam season heightens everybody's discussion in your house about, are you studying? Are you doing enough study? Finding that balance to say, well, and letting people know that that's what you're going to do. Twice a week, I'm still going to continue with my leadership activity, or I'm a sports coach who goes and coaches some of the primary schools, or something that they're doing, or something in the community. I would be saying you're still able to do that. You might modify it slightly, and again, certainly as you get into exam time, you'll modify it. For example, you may want to study. Some people might benefit from having a last look or they feel they don't want to the night before an exam go and do something else. Others do. Again, that's about being individual and understanding what is best for you. But the reality of that is you may modify it. It doesn't mean stopping it. So I think it's just about adjusting rather than stopping.
So kind of speaking about your kind of experiences then of kind of being a teacher and kind of whether that's a PE teacher or being kind of a deputy head or a head teacher or moving into kind of your director role, was there anything you kind of found kind of through those roles that young people really kind of benefited from a kind of sporting kind of like from a sporting point of view, whether that's kind of a structure in terms of how you kind of structure your lessons or a structure in terms of maybe something else? Was there anything you kind of seen throughout those roles that you think was really important?
I think one of the main things would be about being well planned in what you do and trying as best you can, whether that be the structure of your lesson or you're involved in sport, and it doesn't mean to be perfectly planned. The notion about having a plan, whether that be a study plan or whether that be having an idea of what I'm looking at over the course of a week, or the course of the next 4 weeks, how do I fit in my sport versus how I study. I think that I had that throughout, and for me that was probably one of the most important things that you can do, is having some degree of effective plan that would go along with that. And again, I don't mean, some people are amazing at it, although some people spend too much time planning and not enough time doing. You need to find the balance between a plan that's workable for you. If you're someone that benefits from having a multicoloured plan that's got lots of detail behind it, that's great if it leads to the actions that you need. If you're somebody that has a light plan, but again, you find that that's beneficial because it makes you do the thing and it helps you, I would say it's much more about the process of the plan than how the plan looks itself, and you being able to think about things and spending a bit more time behind it. So that would be the one thing I would say that stayed with me, whether that be take part in sport or whether that be managing my own job, or even now about the kind of planning that takes, or in the previous jobs I've done. If I could say to young people, it's about pausing and thinking about what you do rather than thinking, oh, I've not done anything. You then feel equally anxious. That builds up a bit more. So if you can be as well planned as you can that works for you, I think that helps.
You've said I know you've touched on this a little bit previously, but what would you say is the if there was one benefit from you that really sticks out from being physically active and sort of staying involved in sport and physical activity well during your exams, what do you think that would be?
Do you know, goodness, that's a very good question. I think it would be about the feeling of normality. If it was normal, feeling good, that notion of managing whether you're feeling slightly nervous or whether you're feeling worried about something, being part of physical activity allows you to feel a bit normal, allows you to feel that normal interaction. Do you know, people think that exams are very important. Let's not kid ourselves on that we set aside time for them. They won't define you as a person, and they shouldn't be so important to you as an individual that you can't really see straightforward in anything else. I think you have to apply some degree of logic to that. I think that what you need to try to do is find a degree of normality in your life, and sport can allow you to do that. It can literally take you to a different place physically. It can mentally take you to a different place, and it means that you're then not consumed by just one thing. And I think for me that would be the biggest thing, that you can take part in something and not be consumed by this thing sitting on your shoulder talking about exams. We just need to take a breath on that and understand, by taking part in sport and physical activity, you get the physical benefit of it, but you also get that social benefit and the psychological benefit that comes with it too.
Yeah, it's like, and it's hard as well because it's kind of moving on to a next question a little bit around because I think there's like we've touched on a little bit throughout it, but like we say, it's quite hard to to justify or to identify what is physical activity and what does it mean. So from your perspective of somebody who, like you say, has been at the very, very top and has kind of worked your way up to be an incredibly successful and had sort of such a great impact across young people across the country and across the council. What for you does physical activity mean? And kind of aside to that as well, what do you think what do you think an active lifestyle kind of looks like for different people?
And again, a good question, because it's something you grapple with, isn't it? It is about being active. You need to be active in what you do. And how can you define that? I do think that going out and walking is about being active. I think that going out and doing something around those commitments. However, there are some specifics, I think, as the PE teacher and we're talking now, is I do think you need to do some moderate to vigorous physical activity. You need to get your heart rate up. If you're really going to have a genuine impact on your health, you need to get your heart rate up, whatever that may be, whether that be a pace around your walking. Going and being active is good. Going out and walking the dog is good. But actually, you need to do a wee bit more than that if we're then going to start to talk about the physical benefits of physical activity. You need to look at moderate to vigorous physical activity somewhere along the way. Walking a bit faster might be enough in some respects, or going on a bike, or doing some of the different kinds of activities that you may end up doing. I absolutely think that becomes really crucial. I think you then need to include that and try to develop some degree of habit. The habitual nature of physical activity becomes important. If it's a habit for you, it's a good habit. And if you're in that shape of it, and that doesn't mean that it will always be straightforward. If you've set aside a time and there's another reason, or you go to the gym early and you're tired one morning, or too late, you find another reason because you're hungry or something gets in the way, you need to fight that a bit. And if all of us need to fight a bit of that, I'm quite hungry. I don't think I'll just have something to eat rather than going out and doing some exercise. I think you need to fight that bit. And I think the reality for me is that we need to make sure that goes back to something you said earlier, we need to provide opportunity. That's what we as the adults need to try to do to support young people. We need to help provide young people with the opportunity, and actually young people need to take the step forward. There's a requirement on young people to take that step forward and to trust that they will get the benefit and believe in that process as well. So for me, it is about doing lots of different activity and being active, but you need to do something a bit more as well. You need to do that thing in which you feel you've exerted yourself, because you will get a genuine benefit that comes along with that as well. And if you can do that, but you need to do it more than once in the week. You need to develop a bit of a habit that goes along with it.
I think it's brilliant as well to kind of going from what you've said there around that kind of like, and I think it kind of relates back to what we spoke about previously, is it kind of everybody's different and everybody has kind of different kind of lifestyles. Everyone has different commitments and everyone has kind of different things that they like to do and different things that make them tick. So I think from that perspective, I think that's kind of something that hopefully a lot of young people can take away from that. It's kind of everyone's different and everyone kind of has, like you say, everyone's got different commitments and stuff, but there's something from that you can take away, and whether that's kind of working around what you've got. So like you say, whether that's kind of trying something different, whether that's going for a run or playing a bit of five-a-side, or even if it's like something as simple as maybe taking the stairs instead of the lift, or maybe getting off the bus stop at like a couple of stops earlier or something like that. There's always kind of something to take away from that. So moving into kind of the final question, which I've got for today to hopefully kind of end off on a good note, is if there's any kind of bit of advice or kind of a tip that you would give for young people from a kind of studying perspective and staying active at the same time and living a kind of active and healthy lifestyle, what would that be?
Well, there's maybe a couple of things. I would say do something. And that's both in terms of your study. It's never too late to pick the book up. It's never too late to go and look at something that you're not unsure of. Do something. And in terms of physical activity, do something. Because by doing that, that really helps you. And although we talk about being well planned and all of those other things, just by going and taking that step forward, literally in some instances as well, go do something, because what that does is it allows you then to take the next step, and it allows you to build a sense of confidence. It allows you to look at your own well-being, and you can understand sometimes it's maybe not quite as daunting. Sometimes it's the feeling of anxiety and feeling it's a big thing, and maybe it's stopping you do something, I would always encourage somebody to take part, to do something. Pick your book up. If you're not even in the subject you're not really sure about, if there's a particular subject, just pick it up and just try it. And then that will be the same in any physical activity. There will be something in there that you'll manage. And then the other second part, and maybe importantly as well, there are people there to support you. You don't need to do this in isolation. You have your friends, you have your family, you have your school, you have active schools. There's a community there of people willing you on and wanting you to do well. And that is the other reality as well. You don't need to do this by yourself. If you're struggling, there's somebody to help you. If you're not really quite sure, go ask a question. Be curious about that. Don't worry about that as well. Those are the things for me. Those would be the main things that I would say. Do something and understand that you're not there to do this by yourself. There's other people to support you.
Well, I think that's a kind of absolutely brilliant way to wrap it up there. So, well, thank you very much, Tony. Really do appreciate your time and coming on our podcast. We really do appreciate it. And for all our kind of young people kind of listening to that, hopefully kind of, I think we can all kind of, even from my perspective, I know I've taken lots and lots away from that, from kind of whether that be a kind of exam point of view or a little bit about your journey and living an active lifestyle and stuff like that. So hopefully for all of our young listeners, hopefully you can kind of take away some value from that and kind of hopefully you can try and implement some of the stuff that Tony's been speaking about into your routine while studying for exams. So thank you very much, Tony. Really do appreciate that.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for the opportunity to catch up today.